YouTube, TikTok, the news. It doesn't matter where you look, for the past couple of years you haven't been able to escape the headlines about Japan having houses for sale for a single dollar. This has caused a tsunami of influencers heading to Japan to start their new lives as homeowners in the Japanese countryside. But the big question with this Japanese $1 house mania is that what actually happened to all those people who bought their houses? Are there really, essentially, free houses somewhere out there? And is it possible for you to join these influencers and also move to Japan? So let's dive deeper into these mysteries and find out if something that sounds too good to be true could actually be true. The idea of escaping everything and moving into the Japanese countryside for a new life sounds like something you could have previously only dreamt of. But now, thanks to social media, that dream is slowly starting to seem like something anyone could do. With every influencer under the sun telling people how easy it is to just get a free house in Japan and start a new life, it's no wonder this trend has attracted attention abroad, where housing markets have become a nightmare. The thing with trusting influencers is though that they often skip the fine print, and it is no different this time with the people who try to get you to also buy an empty house, also known as an Akiya, in Japan. So before you start packing up and searching for your own free house, you need to keep in mind that the influencers selling this fantasy aren't just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Since there's more to it. While there's nothing inherently wrong with selling a dream, it's vital to understand that the version of the Akiya lifestyle you see online isn't the whole story. So what's the real story behind these Akiya? And more importantly, if there are actually millions of free houses in Japan, what's stopping someone from taking all of them to themselves? Let's start with the basics. What exactly are Akiya? As mentioned before, they are empty houses scattered across the country, particularly in rural areas. But we're not talking about a few abandoned properties here and there, since 15% of all houses in Japan are Akiyas, which means we're talking about a staggering number of over 10 million empty houses. The main reasons why so many houses are left abandoned can be put into 4 categories: aging population, urban migration, cultural preferences, and tax laws. Japan has one of the oldest populations in the world, and many of the elders still live in the countryside. As the older generations pass away, many of their homes stay where they are. Most Japanese youth move into the bigger cities in search of better job opportunities, and once their elder family members pass away, the younger generation usually has little interest in maintaining these properties in the countryside. The reason people in Japan generally aren't interested in moving to these abandoned houses is because Japanese homebuyers tend to prefer new builds. Unlike in many Western countries, where old houses often have historic or sentimental value, a home's value in Japan depreciates over time, meaning older homes are often viewed as liabilities rather than assets. Japanese property tax laws also play a role in this Akiya situation. If the house is demolished, the land becomes subject to higher property taxes. To avoid these costs, most people leave the houses standing, even if they have no intention of ever maintaining or using them. With these houses being abandoned, they are essentially free, and the influencers online have started selling the idea of Japan having free houses for anyone to take, which to many people abroad sounds like the opportunity of a lifetime. But what are these houses actually like? And why would the Japanese government even consider giving them away or selling them for next to nothing, especially to foreigners? To understand that, we have to look at the motivations behind giving away a free house and the realities that come with moving into them. It's easy to see why the trend became viral. There's no denying the charm that influencers bring to the idea of buying an Akiya. Watching a montage of them easily renovating the house and then chilling on their porch is enough to make even a nerd like me start fantasizing about life in the countryside. But here's the thing. It's essential to remember that their job is to make things look enticing. Selling the Akia dream isn't just about sharing their experiences, it's about keeping their viewers engaged, growing an audience, and in the end, it's about making money. For them, a viral video about turning a $1 house into a cozy, livable home turns into ad revenue, sponsorship, and brand deals. For normal people, the reality behind actually turning a $1 house into something livable, well, that's a little less glamorous. The truth is, while an Akia can be bought for next to nothing, these homes often come with a litany of problems and challenges. And we're not talking about just a couple of extra fees here and there. It goes much deeper, and sometimes there are obstacles you could have never even imagined. Even if you manage to buy an Akia for an incredibly low price or even get one for free, there are immediate financial responsibilities that come into play, like registration and license tax, real estate acquisition tax, and gift tax. And these are just the start. But let's say you're prepared for all of that. You've budgeted enough money to handle the taxes and you're ready to make your dream a reality. Well, immediately afterwards, there comes another problem. Japanese houses historically aren't made to last. So most of the time they require significant renovations, especially considering many of them might have been abandoned for decades. Most of these abandoned houses aren't what they seem to be on the outside. Even if they look fine, you can never fully know what you are actually buying. As an example, this Australian woman bought herself an Akia which seemed to be fine on the outside, and she was assured there was structurally nothing wrong with the house, so she decided to sign the papers without doing an inspection with a registered builder, because after all, she was on a budget. However, after she tried turning the water on, she realized there was a problem with the pipes. A problem that required ripping out the bathroom and putting a whole new bathroom in. But this was also just the beginning of her problems when it came to her new house. And in her own words, this initially cheap house turned into a nightmare scenario for her. When you buy an abandoned house in a foreign country, it's impossible to tell how much time, effort, and money you'll end up having to put into making the house something you can live in. This is another reason why most Japanese themselves prefer to tear down the old house and simply build a new house on its place, because most of the time the price will end up being the same. But it's not all about the money, since that's the least of your problems when buying an Akia. There are actually far bigger obstacles you have to face after moving into your new house. The Japanese government isn't going to just give out free apartments to foreigners. The whole point of giving out these houses is to vitalize the dying countryside, which means most of the time you are actually required to live in the house. And let me tell you, it isn't a short time. After you sign the paperwork to your new house, you might have to live there for up to 20 years. And that's not all of it. Many towns even require you to take part in the community service on top of that. The image that the Akia influencers might be selling you is an image of free life in the countryside. But the truth is that most of the time it's more like the Japanese government wants to imprison foreigners, force them to renovate the houses, and take part in community service, since the local Japanese are too old to take care of the rural areas themselves. Countryside in Japan, while beautiful, comes with its own set of challenges. It's one thing to spend a peaceful weekend there away from the city, but it's another to live there alone as the lonely foreigner for 20 years. There is a reason why the local people are moving away from these areas. Essential services like hospitals, schools, and supermarkets may be miles away. On top of this, rural communities often consist of mostly elderly residents, and while this might seem charming at first, it can be difficult to socialize as the only young person in town, especially when you're a foreigner. In these areas, the local people have known each other their entire lives. While the people are often polite and welcoming, becoming an accepted member of the community isn't automatic. Living as a foreigner in Japan, even living in Tokyo where people are more used to foreigners and there are also other foreigners living there, can be hard. So it might be mentally impossible for most people to be able to live in these rural areas for a longer time. When it comes to the influencers themselves, many of them come with unique circumstances that help them navigate these challenges. Most of them have local connections, speak fluent Japanese, or have already spent significant time in Japan, which is why they often have an easier transition to life in countryside than the average newcomer moving from abroad. Those people who have decided to move to a $1 Japanese house solely from online content, to them the reality of actually living there might be gruesome. But even after all of this, if there is someone out there willing to sign the paperwork to live in the countryside alone for 20 years and willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars in renovating the house, even if they're willing to do all of this, there is still one significant barrier that could stop them from doing all of this. And it's something most people don't even think about until it's too late. So let's say you've paid your taxes, renovated the house and got used to living in the countryside. You might be thinking, this is it, I've done it. But after a while in Japan, you're going to face your ultimate hurdle. One that most people don't even consider. Your visa status. Buying an Akiya and living in rural Japan might seem like a straightforward plan. But the thing is, unlike in some countries where investing in property can grant you a long-term visa, in Japan the visa laws are pretty strict. And property ownership in Japan does not grant you visa. Most foreigners in Japan have limited duration visas. Visas in here typically last only a few years and come with specific conditions. Owning an Akiya won't change that. Unless you have a permanent residency, you'll need to renew your visa regularly, and there's no guarantee that your application will be approved. While some towns running these Akiya schemes are desperate for new residents, they still have to operate within national laws. They might encourage people to move in, but they can't help you navigate visa renewals or guarantee your right to stay. Imagine investing time, money and effort into making an Akiya your home and living there for years and then having something happen that makes you unable to renew your visa and all that effort is gone. The romanticized version of Akiya ownership taps into powerful desire, the desire to escape and start fresh. And while influencers are fantastic at showcasing that dream, remember that they are just some people doing YouTube, and the whole point of their channel is to make their life look good. While getting an Akiya for free is technically possible, the path to making one into your home is filled with challenges. There are real success stories out there, people who have faced these challenges and made it work. But the thing is, those stories come from individuals who knew what they were getting into, prepared accordingly, and were also a bit lucky. It's good to remember that not everything we see online is as simple as it seems. Japan is a fantastic country and many people dream of living in here, but we also have to remember that the grass is always greener on the other side. So my personal advice before signing a 20-year-old prison sentence to the countryside would be to come and check the country beforehand. Learn the language, learn the culture, and if you still feel like buying an Akiya, go for it. It's not impossible, just a bit harder than the internet makes it seem. See you next time.